Picture a country made entirely of islands, 1,192 of them, scattered across the Indian Ocean like confetti. Now picture that more than 80% of those islands sit less than 1 meter above sea level. The ocean surrounding this country is rising at 3 to 4 millimeters every single year, and that rate is accelerating. Scientists estimate that under a high emission scenario, sea levels could climb by a full meter before 2100. Do the math, and the conclusion is almost too stark to say out loud. The Maldives, a country of around 500,000 people, could lose most of its habitable land within the lifetime of children alive today. So what do you do when your country is disappearing beneath the ocean? Most governments would call that an unsolvable problem. The Maldives decided it was an engineering challenge. They started building new land, not reinforcing existing islands, not building higher walls, physically manufacturing brand new islands pumped from the ocean floor, elevated above the waterline and designed from the ground up to survive what's coming. It's either the most audacious climate adaptation project on Earth, or a temporary fix that could make the problem worse. And right now, nobody can tell you with certainty which one it is. To understand why the Maldives is doing this, you have to understand what it's actually up against. The country sits in the northern Indian Ocean, about 700 kilometers southwest of India. It's made up of 26 natural atolls, ring-shaped coral reef structures built up over thousands of years on top of submerged volcanic ridges. The problem is that these atolls are extraordinarily flat. The capital city, Malé, sits at a maximum elevation of just 2.3 meters above sea level at its highest point. The average across the country's inhabited islands is closer to 1.5 meters. More than 80% of all land sits under 1 meter. That means the Maldives has almost no buffer. When sea levels were stable, that wasn't a catastrophic problem. The coral reefs surrounding the atolls acted as a natural first line of defense. Their angular structures can reduce incoming wave energy by up to 97% and cut wave height by as much as 74%. The islands were protected by their own natural seawall. But two things are happening simultaneously that are destroying that protection. First, sea levels are rising, driven by thermal expansion of warming ocean water and accelerating glacial melt. Second, ocean warming is causing mass coral bleaching. In 2016 alone, more than 70% of Maldivian reefs experienced an extreme bleaching event triggered by El Niño heat stress. Dead coral is brittle, breaks apart in rough weather, and when reef height drops even by a meter, you effectively lose your entire natural breakwater. So the Maldives isn't just facing rising seas, it's facing rising seas while the biological structure that has always protected it from waves is dying. A 2024 World Bank analysis found that without effective adaptation, coastal flooding could damage up to 3.3% of the country's total assets by 2050 during typical storm events alone, causing between $700 million and $1.1 billion in GDP losses. For an economy built almost entirely on tourism and fishing, that kind of recurring damage is existential. The Maldives' response started in 1997 with a project that at the time had never been attempted at this scale. Engineers identified a shallow, submerged coral platform sitting in a lagoon about 8 kilometers northeast of Malé. Then, over the following years, they pumped millions of cubic meters of sand from the surrounding seafloor onto that platform, slowly building it upward until it broke the surface and kept going. The result was a brand new island, Hulhumalé. It now covers 4 square kilometers, making it the 4th largest island in the entire country. But more importantly, it was built at 2 meters above mean sea level, twice the height of Malé and far higher than almost any naturally occurring island in the archipelago. Today, Hulhumalé is home to more than 50,000 people. It has residential high-rise buildings designed with north-south orientation to reduce heat gain, streets laid out to channel wind through the island and reduce the need for air conditioning in a country facing increasingly intense heat, solar panels installed on the rooftops of 1,000 social housing apartments, a wetland area, parks, a functioning hospital. The plan is for the population to eventually reach 240,000, roughly half the country's current total population, all living on a single artificial island that didn't exist 30 years ago. Construction happened in 2 phases. Phase 1 covered 188 hectares. Phase 2 added another stretch of reclaimed land, connected by bridges over a channel. The initial project cost around $63 million. A major expansion added another $50 million. A large housing development on top of that added over $130 million more. And those figures don't include the ongoing infrastructure investment needed to build an entire city from scratch. But Hulhumalé was just the beginning, because the Maldives is now pursuing something even more experimental, a floating city. 10 minutes by boat from Malé in a protected lagoon, the Maldives floating city is under development in partnership with Dutch architectural firm Water Studio. Unlike Hulhumalé, this project doesn't involve dredging or land reclamation at all. Instead, it consists of interconnected floating platforms arranged in a hexagonal grid pattern inspired by the structure of brain coral, designed to rise and fall with the water rather than fight it. The first phase plans for 5,000 homes and 20,000 residents. The platforms are moored to the lagoon floor and connected to a ring of barrier islands that absorb wave energy before it reaches the floating structures. The developers argue it leaves coral reefs largely undisturbed, and even plans to seed new coral growth around the structures to enhance protection. Here's where the story gets complicated. Because while Hulhumalé is genuinely functioning as a real city with real residents at a real higher elevation, the process of building it came with a cost that scientists are still assessing. To build the island, engineers dredged sand from the surrounding seafloor. That dredging damaged the reef bed where the island now sits. It temporarily clouded surrounding water with sediment, disrupting marine ecosystems. And critically, every ton of sand pumped up from the seafloor is sand that's no longer contributing to the natural sediment supply that keeps coral atolls stable. Here's the uncomfortable science. Coral reef atolls are not static landforms. Research has shown that many of the Maldives islands have actually remained stable in size, or even grown slightly, over recent decades through a process of natural sediment accretion. The coral produces sediment, currents deposit it on the islands, and the islands slowly build themselves higher over time. That process depends entirely on healthy coral reefs continuing to produce sediment. And coral bleaching, driven by the same ocean warming causing sea levels to rise in the first place, is cutting off that supply at the source. So there's a painful irony at the center of the Maldives strategy. The land reclamation that created Hulhumalé may have damaged some of the reef systems whose health was the island nation's best natural long-term defense. Human Rights Watch has raised additional concerns, arguing that reclamation projects have in some cases ignored environmental protection laws, and that the expansion of land into shallow lagoons is increasing flooding risks on nearby natural islands rather than reducing them. And then there's the question of the floating city's resilience. Engineers face serious challenges anchoring large-scale floating structures against the cyclic wave loading and tidal forces of an oceanic environment. The structures need to withstand monsoon-driven swells. Marine ecologists have raised concerns about microplastics and chemical leachates from the floating platforms entering surrounding waters over time. The fundamental tension is this: the Maldives is deploying cutting-edge engineering to fight a crisis caused by carbon emissions it had almost no part in creating. The entire country's annual carbon emissions total just 0.3 million tons, a figure dwarfed by global shipping alone. They are paying with their land and their reefs and their treasury for a problem the world made.